Listen, okay? Everybody watch this video. Fuck the reflecting pool. We don't need to talk about that right now. What I'm about to tell you is like the epitome of injustice. It is one of the biggest double standards I've ever seen in my fucking life. Let me read it. I'm going to read it to you directly from the article. And if you think I'm just bullshitting, you can Google ICE protesters arrested in Texas and read the article and the information for your damn self. This is what it says. A group of Texas protesters convicted of terrorism charges received unusually harsh sentences of at least 50 years in prison on Tuesday in a closely watched case that was widely seen as a test case of the Trump administration's effort to crack down on dissent. So long story short, these people went and protested against ICE at this ICE detention facility, right? Some of them took the extreme route, and a police officer, he pulled his weapon, and then in response, one of the protesters pulled their AR-15, shot the officer in the shoulder. The officer survived, things like that. I'm not condoning any of the protesters who used their weapons behavior. I'm not condoning any of that, but listen to the fucking details. Some of these people got sentenced to 100 years in prison when all they did was go and protest at an ICE facility. It was planned, it was coordinated. They went and protested because they don't support what ICE is doing. They don't support what the federal government is allowing ICE to do. Now, did they do some things outside of the law? Did they go beyond using their free speech and their right to protest? Yes, but who else did that? The fucking January 6ers did almost the exact same thing. They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." They broke into the Capitol building. They vandalized the fucking Capitol. They assaulted Capitol Police on camera, and the Trump administration pardoned them all. People, this is the bad place. This is far beyond the bad place. Todd Blanche. First of all, it is a ginormous problem that Donald Trump's former personal lawyer is now the acting attorney general of the United States of America. That is a giant fucking red flag, conflict of interest, whatever the fuck. But this fucker says the sentences handed down today make clear that Antifa's terrorists who attack law enforcement and federal facilities will face swift and uncompromising justice. Their violent extremism has no place in our country, and the Department of Justice will continue to aggressively investigate, disrupt, and prosecute those who threaten law enforcement officers or undermine the rule of law. I'm going to read that again. This coming from Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general. He said, their violent extremism has no place in our country, and the Department of Justice will continue to aggressively investigate, disrupt, and prosecute those who threaten law enforcement officers or undermine the rule of law. This is coming from the administration and the political party that pardoned every single January 6er. This is a ginormous double standard. This is a ginormous, like we're talking about the fucking reflecting pool and the algae and the paint and shit. This is some of the most rules for thee and not for me type shit I've ever seen in my fucking life. They just sentenced supposedly, allegedly Antifa members to 50 to 100 years in fucking prison, calling it acts of terrorism and attacking law enforcement after pardoning over 1,500 January 6ers. That is clearly stating to the entire country, as long as you attack law enforcement, but under the name of Donald Trump, it's fine. But if you do it against anything the Trump administration says is okay, if you're against us, we're going to sentence you to prison. Listen to this. I'm not done. It says the punishment for the protesters exceeds the lengthiest prison sentence given out for the attack of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, who was convicted of seditious conspiracy, was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the far-right group, the Oath Keepers, was sentenced to 18 years in prison. So they can go and invade the Capitol because they're not happy with the results of a free and fair election that stated to the entire country that Joe Biden would take over the Oval Office after Donald Trump's first administration. They are a part of the January 6th attempt at a fucking coup, the January 6th insurrectionists, and they get fucking 22 years in prison. But then when you have protesters standing up against ICE and going to protest out of detention centers and shit like that, that were almost as violent or equally as violent as the January 6ers were, they get sent to prison for more than double the amount of time that the January 6th insurrectionists got. Mind you, the January 6th insurrectionists didn't serve the fucking term that they got sentenced to, because Donald Trump pardoned every single one of them. Every single one of them. Every single person that stormed the fucking Capitol and chanted "Hang Mike Pence" and broke into the fucking Capitol and the offices and attacked Capitol police officers, were pardoned. But then they'll call them Antifa terrorists when somebody shoots their AR-15, hits a cop in the shoulder, after pardoning the people who attacked Capitol police officers. Are we grasping how dangerous this is? This intimidation tactic. This, hey, if you protest against us, we'll sentence you to decades upon decades upon decades upon decades of prison. But if you protest in our favor, don't worry, we got you. We'll pardon you. This is not democracy. This is not free speech. I don't know what version of America this fucking is, but it is so backwards. It is so insane. I think the guy who fired the AR-15 got 100 years in prison for attacking law enforcement. But the January 6th insurrectionists who also attacked law enforcement and challenged the rule of law that said that Joe Biden was going to take over the Oval Office as president of the United States after Donald Trump's first time, they got pardoned by the Trump administration. That cannot be more clear of a double standard. That is the biggest double standard I've ever seen in my fucking life. You can't put full innocence on either party, on the January 6ers that were protesting, or on the Antifa members. Antifa isn't fucking real. On the American citizens that were using their First Amendment right to protest against all the bullshit ICE is doing. You can't put either party in full innocence, but the January 6ers were pardoned. While these handful of protesters in Texas got sentenced to 50 to 100 years in prison. If there's no pardon, if there's no appeal, these people will most likely spend the rest of their lives in prison, people, while the January 6ers got pardoned. This, I'm not going to say this should scare everybody, because if it scares everybody, that's exactly what the Trump administration wants. They want to terrify you. They want to scare you. They want to bully you out of using your First Amendment right. But you need to pay attention to what the fuck is happening in this country. It will only escalate. They will continue to try to intimidate and push things so that they go their fucking way. These people being sentenced like that in Texas is a fucking problem, people. It is a fucking problem.